live. Now, an uproar is brewing in the Western Cape over teaching jobs that are set to be lost by the end of the year. Unions have lodged formal disputes over the Education Department's plan to cut approximately 2,400 posts for the 2025 academic year. Now, the unions say that the poor and working class would be hardest hit. The Western Cape Education Department has said that it will not be able to maintain the current number of educator posts due to severe budget cuts. South Africa is already grappling with a shortage of 31,000 teachers in the country. But for more on this latest development, we joined virtually by the provincial head of the National Professional Teachers Organisation, NAPTOSA's Riedwaan Ahmed. Riedwaan, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Hi, good morning. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
A very important matter, this, Riedwaan. We talk about the shortage of teachers in the country and now the announcement by the Western Cape Education Department that they plan to reduce the number of teachers for the 2025 academic year because of budget constraints. But as NAPTOSA, what is it that you would like to foreground in response to what the department has indicated?
Well, thanks for that. What NAPTOSA is really saying is that we cannot afford to reduce the basket of posts, particularly now at this stage. We are aware already that we have overcrowded classrooms and the projected teacher-to-learner ratio of 1:36.7, in our view, does not in reality translate into the classroom. And so therefore, to cut further posts at this stage within education will place a further burden on the education system. Also keeping in mind, for example, that our educators are already, in a challenging situation with overcrowded classrooms, and the well-being of educators for us is also very important. And then lastly, on the foreground is the notion that we are speaking about quality education for every learner in every classroom, in every school. That reality, in our view, now becomes an ideology.
The department did indicate, Riedwaan, and they maintained that they did consult with trade unions about this matter as required by policy. So talk to us about those engagements and, how you guys got along and where those engagements currently are at.
Well, the engagements or the consultation process that is being referred to, that has been concluded in terms of the law. We've met with the Minister of Education as a first stage to the consultative process, and then also that was followed by further consultations with the head of education. Now, trade unions party to these consultations, as well as school governing body foundations, we had made certain input and recommendations for the department to consider before implementing what I now call the 2407. Now, some of it might have been considered, some might not have. And ultimately, the consultation process has concluded. Staff establishments now has been issued to our schools, and we've seen reduction in posts to the amount of some schools losing 10 posts, for example, others 7, 3, and 5. And so that is the challenge that we are faced with. Further to that, the challenge that we've also raised with the department is how many of the 2407 are in fact temporary educators and how many are permanent, because the impact of this reduction in posts will affect those who are permanently employed and those who are temporarily employed or those who are on contract. It will impact differently on them.
So just explain that to the rest of us in terms of how it's likely to impact both of those categories.
Okay, so let's start with the contract educators. For contract educators, their contracts will not be renewed with effect from the 1st of January 2025, which means that they will be unemployed. And so that is a challenge for NAPTOSA. And then the permanent educators, they will be declared what we used to call in excess. The new term is additional to the staff establishment. So if you are permanently employed, you will be carried additional to the staff establishment if you have been identified as in excess. And then the department has a process of attempting to suitably place these educators. So that is with regards to permanent, so they will not be losing their jobs. There is no retrenchment package. A lot of people are asking us about the retrenchment package. There is no retrenchment package as there is no exit tool at the moment. So that will be the impact on the permanent educators. And as I said, for the contract educators, the challenge there is that their contracts will not be renewed come 1 January 2025. Now, we're still looking at how many of the temporary educators are being affected. And we have lodged a dispute with the ELRC in terms of the enforcement of a collective agreement which relates to the conversion of temporary to permanent educators. Thanks.
It sounds very dire, but the head of department there in the Western Cape, Brent Walters, wrote to the schools to inform them that they, as the department, have done everything that they can to fight for these teachers. So what does this mean? Is it a fait accompli? There's nothing else that can be done. These measures will come into effect at the end of the year. Or are you, as NAPTOSA, still hoping that there can be a reversal of sorts somehow?
Well, to be quite honest with you, we have also been informed, yes, by the head of education and the minister that they are still approaching National Treasury to see if there cannot be a rethinking of this. But at this stage, it appears to be a fait accompli that these 2407 will be reduced in the basket of posts. I think as NAPTOSA, from a national perspective also, we are trying to put pressure on National Treasury to see, whether there can be an addition to the budget, although we know that the newly elected minister has already indicated the budget for education for 2025. So at this stage, it's a really dire situation. As you said, we further feel that these are uncharted waters, and we are appealing, that there must be outside of the box thinking in terms of focusing on how can we ensure quality education, and that particularly our contract educators are not without a job come next year. Further to that, for example, is the notion that we have students who are completing their 4th year in education this year as we speak. The question then is, what about those educators who are newly qualified as well? And so that is a further challenge that we are faced with. And obviously, we are mandating our members in terms of how do we deal and go with this forward, whether it be a fait accompli and or whether there's going to be, a revised budget by National Treasury.
And I'm glad you touched on student teachers at this stage, because we constantly told about the need for teachers, trying to encourage people to take up education and teaching as a profession. And then this happens. And I know you are the provincial head for the Western Cape, Riedwaan, but as NAPTOSA, are you aware of any similar sort of movements being made in terms of teacher post reductions in other provinces at this stage?
Thanks for that. Now, at this stage, we have not been informed, and obviously we are a national organization. We have checked with our other provinces, and it appears that in the other provinces, there has been no reduction in posts as yet. But that having been said, remember, this comes or flows from what we call the MTEF process, your medium-term expenditure framework. And so we're not sure whether those other provinces have already started their particular processes. But for now, as we're speaking to you live, we are not aware of any reduction of any posts in any of our other provinces, only in the Western Cape.
So that's an interesting one to keep an eye on as well. But NAPTOSA received an initial list of schools, as you indicated, that would be affected by this move. Now, which schools will lose the greatest number of posts? As per area, if you could just outline for us where this is likely to impact the hardest.
Well, thanks very much for that. We've sent out a Google form. We have received quite a number of responses from our members and our schools. And at this stage, it would appear, that if one wants to use the term underprivileged communities, that they are going to be most hard hit. I mentioned earlier on, we are aware, for example, of a school in Hermanus, a very small area there. That school is losing 10 posts. Now, one can just imagine, what losing 10 posts is like for a school within that impoverished community. We're also aware that they're looking, or that they're applying what is called the quintile system in determining staff establishments. We have long since argued that the quintile system appears to be incorrect in terms of that it needs to be revised. And so in essence, your question, from what we are seeing from our dashboard at the moment, is that our poorer communities are being most hard hit or affected by this. Also keeping in mind is that where, for example, you have this reduction in posts, most school governing bodies would inevitably, in my considered view, now raise school fees or increase school fees to try and accommodate the appointment of governing body educators.
And I suppose in the final analysis, Riedwaan, the impact on learning and teaching, because that's ultimately what it comes down to. How's this likely to impact that?
Well, as I said, our view is that this will collapse the education system. You cannot. We already sitting with overcrowded classrooms. We said that the projected ratio is 1:36.7. That does not relate entirely to reality within our classrooms. We've polled our schools. We have schools or educators with a class with 59 learners. Now, how does one ensure quality education, for each and every child in every classroom individually? Some of our learners need individual attention. And so how will our educators cope with this? And again, we raise the issue of educator well-being, as an impact, of this, and particularly also quality education within the Western Cape.
Well, Riedwaan, we'll have to leave it there for now, but thanks so much for engaging us. Riedwaan Ahmed is the provincial head of the National Professional Teachers Organisation, NAPTOSA, speaking to us about the planned job cuts in the Western Cape schools. Around 2,400 jobs are due to be cut, and this is due to budget constraints. At this point, as Riedwaan indicated, NAPTOSA not aware of any cuts in other provinces as yet, but this is the situation in the Western Cape. Feel free to let us know your comments.